welcome to this week's episode of Will You Accept This Rant? We are so excited because we have Allison back with us from NIU. So excited to have a guest and to have someone new who can rant with us. Allison, would you mind just introducing yourself for anyone who didn't catch our last episode with you?
Yeah, thank you for having me back. I'm super excited. My name is Allison. I am the prevention program coordinator at NIU. So a lot of my job revolves around prevention, around sexual misconduct, dating, domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. And so this was right up my alley, sort of looking into Bachelor Nation with this sort of really, really interesting lens. So I'm happy to be here today.
Well, we are so excited to have you. And like Allison said, we are here because we're talking about The Bachelorette. So for anyone who hasn't tuned in before, we meet weekly during Bachelor Nation season, talk about the latest episode of The Bachelor or Bachelorette, and look at what that episode tells us about relationships, love, consent, sex, anything involved in there, how our society thinks about those things, kind of as we see under the microscope of Bachelor Nation. It is a silly show, but we love to break it down, dissect things, and really get an idea of how are we learning about relationships and what are we learning about relationships from the kind of media we consume. So we are here to take a critical lens looking at The Bachelorette. And this week we tuned in with Tayshia. For anyone who is jumping in new to this season, you might have thought we started with Claire, but here we are with Tayshia. It was our first week, really just Tayshia. So it was very exciting. We had a couple of group dates and a rose ceremony. So what did you guys like about this episode? Who were the standout guys? What were the standout moments? What did you love?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get started, but I love Ben. He's one of my favorites so far at this point. One thing that really stuck out to me in this episode was just how romantic Ben was when he was asking Tayshia for consent. You know, we talk about this all the time and talk about the importance of consent, and it doesn't have to be something super awkward. Like, do you care if I touch your leg, or do you care? Like, it doesn't have to be super awkward. And I think Ben gave a really perfect example. Like, it was kind of sexy and flirty how he asked Tayshia to kiss him. And I don't know, I just think that he seems like a really nice, compassionate, really understanding guy, and I hope he goes far.
It's so great to get those examples of consent. Like, we don't get to see that very often, whether that's just because we don't prioritize it or there's just not time to show, everything involved in a relationship in a 30-minute TV show or in an hour and a half long movie. But producers and directors don't often prioritize showing that consent. So getting to see that, and yeah, like you said, Kendall, getting to show that like consent doesn't have to be this awkward process involving lawyers and checklists and documents. It can be part of the flirting, part of the the romance, and it's so great when we get to see that. Definitely.
My favorite, and he has been for a few weeks, my ultimate favorite is Zaxi. I liked him even in the early episodes with Claire. I think he is very mature and very much, I don't want to sound cliche, but there for the right reason.
I thought you were going to say he was a grown-ass man.
Well, Claire Tayshia almost called him old.
Yeah.
In one of their conversations, you could tell the word old was on the tip of her tongue. And he sort of just plays off and says, you can say I'm old.
Sure.
But mature.
Well-seasoned.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I did really appreciate, specifically in that conversation, he tells Tayshia that, he just doesn't really pay attention to the he said, she said of the house and is really focusing on his feelings for Tayshia. And I also really liked the moment where Chasen and Ed were fighting and were having a conversation that was getting really annoying. And Zach and some of the other guys sort of walk over and say, enough is enough. This is not right. This is not productive. You're not squashing anything right here. It's best to just stop. And so he really sort of, I feel like, rallied the guys to sort of go in and be, like you said earlier, Linnea, an active bystander and say, this is not good. This is not healthy. We don't want Tayshia to see this. I really liked his rallying of the troops and his maturity in that.
Yeah, and like not waiting till Chasen and Ed like started a fist fight or something, like, oh, like they're being annoying, they're being like their attitudes are inappropriate, so let me go over and just tell them to knock it off. Like, what a great example of when to intervene and how to intervene. Yeah, I loved that too. Definitely. I mean, and less relevant, say, for our line of work, but I'm going to continue to say I love Bennett. I love Bennett so much. I love the moment where Tayshia was talking in her like her ITM about him, and she's like, you know, Bennett's bougie and I'm bougie too.
Yeah, I did appreciate that.
Because, okay, so Bennett is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. But if he's hers, more power to you. Like, if you are a bougie person and you find your bougie partner, like, great. If you are not a bougie person and that bougie person is annoying to you, okay, don't date them, don't be with them. But like, there's someone out there for you. If any, you know, whatever is your form of bouginess, like, it's not going to work for everybody, and that's okay. You don't have to be everyone's cup of tea, but like, there is going to be someone that likes that about you, or someone that, you know, that you like that about them. And, you know, I don't know, I've just been feeling this theme over and over and over again lately. Like, don't date people you don't like.
Yeah.
So many relationships where people talk about their partner and I'm like, you clearly don't like this person. You don't like their personality. You don't like the things they do. Stop dating them. You're not required to be with people you don't like. So if you're that kind of person, you're like, Bennett is annoying. He's he's an entitled Harvard boy. Like, I don't like that. Great. Don't date Bennett. But if you do like that, if Bennett works for you, go to town. But just like, you don't have to date someone you don't like. And I just felt that with Bennett, like, he's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. But I think he's hilarious. So that's okay. We all have different preferences, and that's okay. And I just thought Bennett was hilarious this week in, his inability to do basic math and spell limousine, but also still bragging about going to Harvard. Like, you do you, buddy. You do you.
It's great TV. I mean, it's so funny to watch. I love that he showed up to the cocktail party in the robe.
Oh gosh.
And you're right. He's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. But if all of the guys there were the same, how boring would the show be, or how boring would that be for Tayshia? So, right. You have to have some variety, and he gives some great one-liners.
Yes. And there are some of those people that, like, I mean, in a real world scenario, if we took the Bachelor bubble and expanded it out, that's kind of how people's relationships are too. Like, you're going to have some relationships with people where it's just like, this is clearly not soulmate level connection, but like, you're fun. And I feel like that's where Bennett is like, okay, none of us think he's actually going to end up with Tayshia, but she has fun with him. And I think anyone who's watched Bachelor stuff for a while, when Tayshia was on Bachelor in Paradise, I really think that was her relationship with like JPJ as well. Like, clearly not a soulmate, but like fun for a while. And it's okay to have relationships like that. We're having fun for a little while and we're going to break up eventually, and it's not the end of the world. I feel like sometimes people get this like pressure to meet your soulmate and marry your soulmate and like start your happily ever after together. But life isn't a Disney movie. It's okay to date the dumb, funny, bougie guy for a while and then move on. Like,
I do think that's important, though. I mean, I guess I don't have a lot of room to talk. I've dated the same guy my whole entire life, and now we're married. But I do think it's important to, I don't know, I think there's so much pressure on like young women if they do date around a lot. But all they're doing there really is learning what they like in relationships and what they don't like. And again, I've ranted about this before, but like, men don't get that pressure of like, oh, well, you can't date around, like, you're such a slut if you do. But women have that, and sometimes it takes a long time to figure out what you like in a relationship and what you don't like. So
and there's no shame in making some mistakes along the way. Some people you meet that like, okay, this wasn't it. Okay, let's move on to the next one. And like not feeling, guilty about that yourself, but also not feeling bad about that if you're that person for someone else, because you will, you know, you're not going to be everyone's perfect match, and that's okay. You know, learn to live with rejection, learn to not judge someone else who, you know, is finding what works for them.
I agree.
Definitely. We ranted about this a little bit before we got on, and I promise we won't rant for an hour like I could, but that date,
the wrestling date,
even the first one with
to prove
Ashley
that you're a man.
Jared, yeah, like all the dates were so dumb. I guess I'm going to rant about this later, but all the dates were so dumb this time. The one thing that I was like, why there were so many cute little connections we saw from the rose ceremony night, like Brendan, whatever his name is. Like they had their little fake horse date. That was cute and funny. We saw Dr. Joe kind of connecting over his family with her. We saw some popsicle sharing. Like there were so many cute moments, and we had to avoid them to watch grown men play tug of war together and cook.
Well, and to just listen to grown men fight. Like I felt like this was like physically fight, but just yell at each other too, you know? I mean, my goodness, this episode. And again, I'm not a huge Bachelorette fan like you two are. So I don't know, maybe this is how all of the Bachelorette seasons are, which I can pretty much, yep, exactly. So I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of toxic masculinity sprinkled throughout.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Allison.
I was really kind of excited for parts of the grown-ass man date. I am all for you make me breakfast and serve it to me in bed. I'm down for it.
Yes.
I liked that portion of it. I think the spelling and the math is something funny that, you know, we can make fun of Bennett for, right?
And we will.
He spent a lot of money for not being able to spell limousine. But those cute little moments got overshadowed by the, like both of you said, that very toxic masculinity. We need to be able to fight. We need to overpower the other men to win Tayshia's time. It is something that we see every season, these competitions, always wrestling. I mean, we saw the water polo, we saw the dodgeball. They're the same ones every season of some sort of competition. And it's set up poorly by producers, of course. And I also think the men end up taking it way too seriously, which is why I tended to like Joe's little riff of very nice smack talking, because he really just was like, I know I'm not going to win. I don't really need to win this to prove to Tayshia anything. And he just took it down a couple notches. But those cute moments, again, overshadowed by a lot of the ickiness.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking like what I could learn from those sorts of challenges. Like, again, if you're looking for a partner for life, a life partner, I'm thinking like what I would take away from that. Oh, like who are the good sports? Who are the people who like have fun with it? Who are the people who are like kind and compassionate? Like, oh, you know, they're ready to dive into anything. They're ready to have fun and, you know, have an adventure, do something that's not like maybe necessarily right up their alley, but they're good sports about it. So if I see a guy who's like hulking out to try to win, that's not going to be attractive to me. And I don't, you know, I hope I'm not alone in that. Like,
no, and I think the reason why we always end up on this conversation of like the toxic masculinity is because we see so often, and I think this episode was such a good example that toxic masculinity really does perpetrate violence. I mean, we saw that with Ed and Chasen. I mean, like who could prove that they were the better man? Who could prove that they were stronger? Like whatever. And then by the end of the season or the episode or whatever, they were ready to fist fight. So it's so ridiculous.
I know people were making fun of Ed because, you know, when it came to like that wrestling date, like, of course, the producers matched up Ed and Chasen because they knew they'd been fighting. But I think like Ed saw that and was like, frick, like this guy has my number. He hates me. He's mad at me. And he is like, I mean, like he kept describing himself like he's Wolverine.
Ew.
Like he's got this weird, this weird
Hated
energy that he is like running with. And if I were Ed too, like I know people are making fun of him, but I'm like, he is being smart. This guy wants to beat him up. I don't like what
Good for him.
What point is there in letting someone vent their anger out on you or like get into this physical pissing match to like manifest your difference of opinion? Like I'm with Ed, like, no.
Yeah.
Like match me up with any of these other guys. Sure, like this could be a friendly, like a wrestling match date, but with Chasen, like that was a fight.
And didn't Chasen say like there will be blood or something
Yes.
like that? Like, no, thank
Yeah.
you. I'd rather not bleed on my date. Thanks.
Running away from Wolverine. Also, of all the superheroes you could pick for yourself, like Wolverine,
Yeah.
like the most toxic superhero character with like the most like frustrated emotions. Like
I think
that's a
Chasen
little
needs
too on the nose there.
Chasen needs a lesson in vocabulary, maybe from Harvard, I don't know. But between Wolverine and then only be able to come up with the term smoke show, which I am not super opposed to being called a smoke show.
No.
But it's the overusage. And if that's the only term you have to call somebody,
Right.
that's
The fact that that was the only thing he could think of, like I was fully prepared, like having seen the previews and knowing that like this smoke show thing was going to be a bit this week, I was fully prepared to come in and be like, it is okay to find your partner hot. It is okay to be physically attracted to your partner. There's nothing wrong with that. I was ready to like defend to the death. And then I watched the episode. I'm like, oh no, that was bad. Like if that's the only thing you can say, if you say that so many times, and like, did you notice he never said it to Tayshia?
No.
Like it never was like, oh, you're a smoke show. Like I love that outfit. I love the way you look right now. Like you're super hot. And that is one aspect of you that I appreciate. Like,
Well, and we ranted
it was
about
never
this.
that.
Yeah, and we ranted about this before too. Like it seems so hard for men to, and I mean, I guess really anyone to describe someone as smart or describe, someone as super compassionate or whatever. Like, especially for women, I feel like the majority of compliments they get is, you are a smoke show or you're so hot or whatever. We don't get compliments of, you're this smart person or I'm really proud of you for doing X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, you look good today. So should that?
I'm sure Tayshia knows that she looks good. Like her job is basically being a model on Instagram. I'm sure she knows that you don't get that job. You don't get that kind of money for posting pictures on Instagram if you're not what our society views as conventionally attractive. Like,
Exactly.
I mean, I think about that often I have nieces and I've like tried to retrain myself. And it's been hard for me too, to compliment things that aren't like, oh, you're so cute, or like, I love that outfit, or like, you're adorable. Like, I don't want them to just feel like that's all they are. Of course they're adorable. Of course their little outfits are so cute. And like, they put their little pigtails on. I'm like, oh, you're adorable. But I want them also to know that they're brave and they're kind and they're smart. And like, or even like, oh, I love your fashion sense, or I love how you put that outfit together.
Yeah.
Or, like we have to learn how to compliment, especially young girls, in different ways, or they'll think that that's the only thing that matters.
And another part to sort of the toxic masculinity portion is that you mentioned it, Linnea, that Chasen said this to all of the guys and never to Tayshia herself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like she was getting the words of affirmation, but it was just that he was sort of making himself seem better to all of the guys. And that is something that I think is perpetually talked about and sort of seen as something that men are supposed to do, right? Men are supposed to think all women are gorgeous all the time and want sex all the time and want to make out with everybody all the time. And that just felt, again, a little icky that he was saying it as sort of a boasting moment to all the men, but then never really saying any of those words to Tayshia herself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what a great example it would be for young men and boys to be watching this show and seeing men sitting around together talking about what they love about Tayshia's personality, or what they love about her drive, or what they love about her intelligence. Like, to just see that modeled, I think is so important, because we become what we see, and we become what we're taught. So we need to not only teach young girls that like there's more to them than just what they look like. We also need to teach young boys that it's okay to talk about these more vulnerable things that you appreciate about someone. Because of course boys think those things. Of course boys know those things and notice those things. I think there's just so much social pressure that, like you said, Allison, the only thing they're allowed to talk about is how attractive they are to women, or how tough they are, how much they want to like win. We don't give boys that chance, like Joe was, just to sit down and say, I think you're a really nice guy, or you know, I was the spelling bee champ, or I played volleyball in high school. Like, seeing that example of a guy who can just be like themselves and not be aggressive, not be you know, overly aggressive with sexuality or overly aggressive with physicality, like to step back and just be a person is so important. And I'm just, you know, that's been my rant for a long time. And that's my rant today, is that the producers keep creating these environments and the guys keep feeding into these environments where we look at physicality and aggression as like the height of masculinity. So it's like, which guy can drag the other guy the farthest, and then you win the physical portion of the grown-ass man challenge, or which guy can beat up all the other guys in the wrestling ring and be the toughest wrestler. Okay, like you win, you know, you win the championship belt, like you win extra time with Tayshia. It just sends this message that the equation is aggression and winning equals you get the hot girl. Like that women are a prize to be won for being the most aggressive, for being the most forward, for being the most physical person. And it sends this message to guys that that's the only thing they can be. And it sends a message to girls that they are literally an object to be won. And I just feel like we've made so much progress as a society in undermining that. And The Bachelorette just keeps dragging us back to that. And I'm so tired of it. I'm so tired of sending this message to guys that being physical is a part of who you are, or being aggressive is a part of what it means to be a man, instead of saying that like true masculinity is like Mr. Rogers or LeVar Burton, or like, you know, like the kind, gentle, creative. That doesn't mean you're weak. That doesn't mean like you can be a linebacker, football player and write poetry. You can be a weightlifter and be a really empathetic person. You know, I want to see those layers to men, and I don't feel like we get that in The Bachelor. Not because they're not there, but because we're not, the TV people are not prioritizing showing that.
My rant.
Yeah, go ahead.
My rant this week is, I hate to give them more talk time, but between Ed and Chasen going back and forth, not only between each other, but also always feeling that they have to go let Tayshia know what is happening. Yeah. And there's a balance here between, I don't want Tayshia to get hurt, and I am truly looking out for Tayshia's best interest, but also what tends to happen is that the men come off looking like they're trying to save the world and save Tayshia, and that Tayshia needs to know every little single thing that is happening so that I can be the one to stand up and say that I saved Tayshia and I let her know, and she needed me to tell her all of this. When in reality, Tayshia's a grown woman and she can see this for herself. We saw multiple times where she walked in to people fighting. Like, she knows that this is happening, whether or not Chasen or Ed is talking to her. So it's just, and we see it season after season, where people will go to the lead and say, I don't think this person's here for the right reasons. And is that okay a little bit? Yeah. But it always leads to the point of, I'm trying to save you from disaster, and I need to be the savior. And that is something that we see over and over again, not only in Bachelor Nation, but I think again in society, where men are often seen as needing to be the savior for women in relationships or outside of relationships. And ultimately on The Bachelorette, it takes away their time with Tayshia. If Ed is sitting down with Tayshia, talking about all the stuff Chasen is doing, he's not making a connection with Tayshia. And it ends up ultimately usually hurting both of the guys.
Exactly.
And so we
Snitches
see it
do not
over and
survive
over.
in this show. They're heading for a 2-on-1 date, and they're both
Mhm.
going to go home.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. I guess my big rant this week, and it's something that I think we hear so often, but on the very first group date, you know, they had this like grown man competition, and Ed, was, you know, we've talked about way too much already, but Ed lost this competition, so he was deemed the man child, and he had to carry around this baby. It was a fake baby, obviously, but
Nobody brought in like their own baby.
Yeah,
to,
I was like, I should probably clarify that.
Baby had to quarantine.
Yeah. But anyway, so we had to carry around this fake baby, and there was just so much, like, so many comments when he first, like, you know, started caring for the baby, like, oh, it's so sexy when men or when dads care for their children. Like, what? We praise men so much for just being dads, you know, and women don't get the same praises for just being mothers, you know. So often I had a friend that was at a baby shower recently, and the host of the party had sent like her husband away, like, as you know, all the women were together, and she was watching the children, and all the women were like, oh geez, he's gonna be tired tonight, like dad is babysitting today. Like, no, you created those children too. It shouldn't be some big round of applause because you watched your kid for a couple of hours when the mother does that all the time. I hate that.
And it does lead to violence. I mean, that's, you know, we rant about these things and it might seem like, oh, that's just an attitude or a cultural thing, but like it leads to these situations where there is so much pressure on one person in the relationship to be the parent. And if the other person like gets all the praise, and it's such like it's almost like an extracurricular activity when they're babysitting or watching the kids, that creates this unequal power dynamic, and it makes it so much harder for both people to come to the table equally. And when we're not coming to the table equally, that leads to a recipe for violence.
Yeah, because
like,
we're giving one person,
so
we're giving one person that power and one person that control, and that's where abuse really thrives. So yeah, I mean, we're not just venting about these things because they annoy us, but it does. I mean, ultimately everything that we vented about today does lead to violence or lead to some sort of unhealthy behavior. So
yeah.
Well, to spinning around, Allison, you want to give out the rose?
Let's talk.
We do have good things to talk about too.
Yeah. We talked about a lot of good things. I feel like they're good things. Yeah.
I am going to give my rose today to Dr. Joe. Dr. Joe keeps impressing us. We get tiny little snippets of Joe every week, and I think we need more.
Give the people what they want.
He's awesome. I love him. He, from the like funny in the moment things, talking about how he was on his middle school or high school volleyball team. He didn't take the wrestling date too seriously. He got in the guy's faces and was like, "You're a great guy. This is fun." It's kind of, again, shooting down some of that toxic masculinity. And I think in one of the tiny little clips we saw of his little date portion with Tasha, he showed the picture of his family. And it just seems any of the times that we do see Joe interacting with Tasha, they're very, we can see there's a connection. We can see that it's just very genuine and relaxed. So I want to see more of Joe. I think Tasha wants to see more of Joe, I hope. So my good rose goes to Joe.
I think we can agree with that.
I strongly support that. I'm ready for more Joe.
For sure. And I think Linnea and I can both agree that this dead rose should, again, go to the producers, right? They set up so many of these uncomfortable scenes, and they really just play into all of the drama of the house. They so played into the Ed and Chasen drama when, you know, they matched them up to wrestle with each other. Linnea, you mentioned Ben probably didn't get time at the end because the producers probably told him it wasn't okay for him to interrupt Tasha.
Yeah.
So
it's all, yeah, they're playing into the drama. They're creating these dates that reinforce these weird gender norms that create this power imbalance, or that contribute to this idea of toxic masculinity. Like, I feel like as a society, we've been getting better about recognizing that men shouldn't have to fit into this man box, and that women shouldn't be excluded from these certain characteristics and traits. And then the Bachelorette producers just like pull us back. And of course, I mean, it's to be expected. Like, the executive producer of the show has been credibly accused of domestic violence. And, you know, there's been so many abusive people on the show and contestants that have been racist and violent and aggressive. Like, of course, this show is horrible. But a lot of that comes down to what kinds of decisions are being made in the editorial room, not just the people and their choices. It's this conscious idea to uphold these ideas at a structural, cultural level that we really need to root out. Pull it up like a dead rose. Get it out of your garden.
I agree. Yeah. I wonder if the seasons would look different, or if they would end differently if the producers didn't have so much of a say. But then again, what is good reality TV? So
the sacrifice
I think
to make.
We're going to see some more competitions this year because they can't travel. So
Yeah.
I have a fear that producers are going to put in more competitions like the water polo, the strip dodgeball,
exactly,
the wrestling.
It makes me wonder what the next season is going to be like, because that one is also going to was filmed in quarantine, but it's The Bachelor, so it's going like, so what will they like all the competitive dates really seem structured around like, we think men, sports, aggression. What are they going to do when it's like a hotel full of women? Are they going to try to do the same thing, or will they lean into like female-oriented stereotypes? I'm curious to see how that's going to go. And don't worry,
we'll be there.
That too.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and Allison, thanks so much for joining us again. We hope to see a lot more of you on our little short Will You Accept This Rant episodes too. So
you're welcome
again,
anytime.
Yeah, exactly. And if anyone is watching this video and you're wondering what the heck we're talking about, tune into The Bachelorette every Tuesday night from 7 to 9. And you can join our conversation by commenting on our video below, or by messaging us, or whatever it might be.
Our blog, our YouTube channel, we've got content everywhere for you.
And if you have a rant that we didn't cover, send it to us and we will talk about your rant too. We loved your rant. So thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Allison.